The Tampa Bay Lightning made another move in the offseason, re-signing backup goaltender Jonas Johansson. Is it a good move or a bad move? We'll talk about that and more on today's episode of Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Josh Sperber here to welcome you into another episode of Locked On Lightning. And thank you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen every day. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if your team is the Tampa Bay Lightning, then this is the show for you. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. And Jonas Johansson raised his salary a little bit for the Tampa Bay Lightning by a bit more than 50%. 2-year contract, average annual value of $1.25 million for Jonas. And he was a $775 cap hit for the Tampa Bay Lightning in 2024. And that new contract for Johansson bumps it up by, I believe, double. My math is pretty bad, but $1,250,000 for Johansson in 2025 to 26 and 27, up from $775 in 24-25. And I understand that to bring a reliable backup goalie like Jonas Johansson back, the Lightning were probably going to have to go into the $1 million+ range. It's just it's a somewhat questionable decision, I think, with the Lightning already up against it in terms of cap room, that the Lightning went to Johansson with that extra, again, almost double the salary that the 29-year-old goaltender got. And I understand the need to do that for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Jonas Johansson had 9 wins in 19 games played. 18 of those games he started. 6 losses, 3 losses in overtime for Johansson, and 1 shutout. He played fewer ice time than last year, his career high, where he did start the season with Andrei Vasilevsky out due to an early season injury. He played 26 games in 23 and 24, down to 19 and 24, 25. And Johansson has shown that he can be a reliable goaltender. And I think he is a pretty reliable backup goaltender. It's just the salary cap is really the only reason that I'm questioning this, because the Lightning already were at the very edge of the $88 million salary cap. And now they're slightly over the cap at 92 and change. But the Jonas Johansson deal was not one that pushed the Lightning over that salary cap, but they could have gone to a guy like Brandon Halverson for a bit cheaper on a 2-year deal than going right to Johansson and having to give him a bit of a raise. The 2-year deal for Halverson would have had an average cap hit of $775,000, like the deal for Diastos that the Lightning made already this season. But if it wasn't for that salary cap, I'd think it's a smart decision by the Tampa Bay Lightning, because Johansson proved that he was reliable. He was liked by his teammates. And, again, he's won the majority of his starts every year with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And, I mean, for a backup goalie, I feel like that's all you need. You just want to get some wins. I mean, were there games in this past season that having Johansson in there instead of Andrei Vasilevsky? Yes. Does any team expect their backup goalie to be on the level of Vezina finalist Andrei Vasilevsky? I'd hope not, because that would be overachieving, I think, to expect that of a backup goalie. But Johansson proved his reliability, and frankly, in his essentially a tryout with the Lightning, Brendan Halverson did not prove his reliability. 24 shots allowed, a goals allowed average of 518 in his one game with the Tampa Bay Lightning. That came against the Utah, now Mammoth. At that point, it was the Utah Hockey Club. 6 goals allowed again in that game, though it was 5 allowed by Halverson, with the 6th being an empty net goal by Alexander Kerfoot. So 5 goals allowed in, really the one game in the NHL, not ideal. But over the course of a season with the Syracuse Crunch, Brandon Halverson was one of the best goalies in the entire AHL. And he was an all-star midseason. He was the main netminder for Syracuse for a playoff team. And yes, the competition level is very different from the AHL to the NHL. So it's not like the Lightning can, just go off that and assume that he's going to put up similar numbers in a call up to the NHL. So the Johansson signing, I think, was the safe pick, because against the Utah Hockey Club, who finished the season pretty low on the totem pole in terms of the standings in the NHL, just those 5 goals on 24 shots was, I think, enough to deny Halverson that backup position. And he'll be likely back in Syracuse if he returns to the Tampa Bay organization in 25 and 26 after the Crunch were eliminated from the postseason. But I think that even with the bigger cap hit, Johansson was the safe move for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I honestly think that he might have been their best option. It's not like a signing of Halverson to a 2-way deal worth $775,000 would have put the Lightning under the cap space. The Lightning already were over the cap. Currently, their annual cap hit is almost $93 million. And the Lightning are going to have to make some more moves in the offseason to, try and get under that cap limit, ideally, and also just try and fill out their roster. But, I expect a very similar team in 2025-26 to the team they had in this past season. And part of that is because of just the cap limits, but also because Julien Brisebois went up and down talking about how much he liked the Tampa Bay Lightning team in the exit interview of the regular season. And I think that bringing back the Lightning's backup goalie instead of going to a less battle-tested, in the NHL anyway, goalie in Brendan Halverson is a step in that direction of keeping the Lightning core together and trying to just, put back on the ice the same sort of playoff team that the Lightning had in this past season. So it's not like I don't like the move of bring back Johansson. I think he's one of the more reliable backup goalies that you'll find in the NHL. And he's still in his prime. Johansson turned 29, or will turn 30 in September. But it's a pretty cheap deal to bring back a reliable backup goaltender and just secure a bit of a safety net for Andrei Vasilevsky for the next 2 seasons. But I think that the move might have been different had the Lightning not already been past the salary cap limit. So I'd still keep an eye on guys like Brandon Halverson and Matt Tompkins, the two goaltenders for the Syracuse Crunch. But Jonas Johansson is going to come back to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And, I think it's for what the move is, I think it's a solid decision by the Bolts to bring back their backup goaltender. And another player who is going to be back for the Tampa Bay Lightning is Oliver Bjorkstrand, who was dealt a big hit against the Detroit Red Wings and is going to be entering a contract year in 25-26. But that does not stop Oliver Bjorkstrand from becoming one of the most motivated players on the Tampa Bay Lightning, as he certainly did not like missing the postseason with an injury. So we'll talk about Oliver Bjorkstrand in the next segment as he gets ready for his first full Lightning season. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites because Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. I've been in that spot where you need the right hire like yesterday. The pressure is on every day, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up the hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit on Indeed. Just go to Indeed.com/locked on right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply, but if you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Oliver Bjorkstrand was the Lightning's big swing at the trade deadline, came to the Bolts along with Yanni Gourde in exchange for Michael Eyssimont and a couple picks over the next 3 years, as well as defender Kyle Alcorn, who went from the Detroit Red Wings to Seattle as part of the deal to help facilitate some of the cap space. Oliver Bjorkstrand, had 37 points in 61 games with the Seattle Kraken and a plus-minus of -1. In about a minute and a half less of ice time per game, Bjorkstrand played 18 games with the Tampa Bay Lightning, scoring 5 goals and dishing out 4 helpers with a plus-minus of +3. Also scored a power play goal for Tampa, which just happened to be his last goal of the season on April 9th against the Toronto Maple Leafs. And it was clear that Bjorkstrand was missed in the postseason for the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Lightning were hit pretty hard by the injury bug, and that was made very clear by just about everyone in those exit interviews, especially the general manager, Julien Brisebois, who talked about big injuries to Bjorkstrand, Anthony Cirelli, Victor Hedman, and Nikita Kucherov, and that wasn't even the only one. But, as Julien Brisebois said, no team in the playoffs is completely healthy. And the Panthers, even themselves, probably had a whole bunch of injuries. But with the Bjorkstrand injury coming even before the playoffs and most of the other banged-up Bolts being key players for the Tampa Bay Lightning, that the injuries certainly hurt the Lightning in the postseason. And something that John Cooper said towards the end of the season in one of the last post-game press conferences of 2025, John Cooper was talking about how at the time of the injury, which came on April 11th against the Detroit Red Wings and required emergency surgery, unfortunately, for Oliver Bjorkstrand, it was just really bad timing in the injury, because Bjorkstrand, as John Cooper said, was really starting to hit his stride with Tampa Bay, really starting to get comfortable on his new line with his new teammates. And that's just a rough time to get injured, because that's exactly what you want in the postseason. You want your big deadline acquisition able to play at his full potential for the playoffs, able to get completely acclimated to the way his new team does things by the postseason. And it seemed like Oliver Bjorkstrand was on track to do that. And there was hope at first that he was going to make at least some of the first round series against the Florida Panthers, but that was not to be. And I think with all the other injuries that the Lightning had, Oliver Bjorkstrand just being in the postseason could have made a difference for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think that just having an extra goal scoring threat, as Bjorkstrand has put up 20 goals or more in every season dating back to 2019 and 2020, in which he had 18, or sorry, I misread. It was 2020 to 2021, in which he had 18 goals, and all but 4 of Bjorkstrand's almost 10 NHL seasons, he has put up over 20 goals a game. And that's just solid consistency from a winger that can translate well to the postseason. Would Bjorkstrand have been the main difference maker against the Florida Panthers? No. Was his presence the only reason the Lightning lost that first round series? No, it wasn't. The Lightning just were outplayed, I think, by the Panthers, and I think some dirty hits had a bit of a factor. But I think that just the presence of Oliver Bjorkstrand would have helped the Lightning's postseason run. And he talked about his injury at the end of the season and talked about the emergency surgery that had him spend 5 days in the hospital in a game that he expected, to kind of be back sooner. He felt sore, but more in the NHL kind of sore. He compared the pain that he had after that Detroit Red Wings loss to a Charlie horse. And that is certainly not a serious kind of pain requiring surgery. So it's clear that Bjorkstrand, expected to be back a whole lot sooner. Maybe didn't even expect to miss the next game following that injury. So it was definitely a bit of a shock for Bjorkstrand, but you can tell that he is very motivated in his first full season with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I think he is going to create a difficult decision for Julien BriseBois and the Bolts front office, because he's got almost a $5.5 million cap hit in his contract that expires next year, and he might be a trade candidate solely based on that expiring contract. But I think he's someone that can really help the Tampa Bay Lightning in his first full season with the team. I mean, you saw what Yanni Gourde did. Granted, Yanni had a lot more history with the Tampa Bay Lightning. It was certainly an easier adjustment for him in getting back to Tampa Bay. But Oliver Bjorkstrand, I think, was the top player that the Lightning acquired in that trade compared to Yanni Gourde. He's slightly younger, and his offensive output is definitely higher than Yanni Gourde's. And he's a couple of years younger at 30 years old. So hopefully that makes for more more success, more time with the Tampa Bay Lightning. But he's someone that I think can really be a factor. And I think a full season of Oliver Bjorkstrand with the Tampa Bay Lightning is going to help the Bolts be a better team. It was clear that he had a positive imprint on Tampa after the deadline deal. And now he's going to be there for a full season. That's a full year of getting used to his new teammates, a full year of just acclimation to the way that John Cooper does things. And I think that he's going to be an impact player for the Tampa Bay Lightning in the 2025-26 NHL season. And there are a couple other potential impact players for the Tampa Bay Lightning, though none of them are currently on the Lightning right now. We'll talk about some guys from the Syracuse Crunch who had a really solid 24-25 as the Crunch season was over, ended by the postseason, and a couple players from Syracuse that I think could make an impact for Tampa Bay next season. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and save more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is now smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Let's talk about the Syracuse Crunch. The Tampa Bay Lightning's AHL affiliate took a late flyer to the postseason before getting swept out of the first round. And I talked about Brendan Halverson already, as well as Matt Tompkins. But we're going to have a chat about some of the skaters for the Syracuse Crunch that might be able to have an impact in the 25-26 season. I think the first one for me has to be Dylan Duke. Dylan Duke and Max Crozier are probably the offensive and defensive player that I'd get most excited about for the Bolts. Crozier got called up for the playoffs as Victor Hedman played through an injury in Game 5. But he did not end up seeing the ice in the postseason. Finished with a plus-minus of 16, which led the Tampa Bay Lightning team, and had 9 goals and 25 assists in 52 games for the Syracuse Crunch. Crozier was also called up to the Tampa Bay Lightning in the regular season, tying the mark of Connor Sheary for the most games played by a player who primarily played for Syracuse in 2024 and 2025. And Connor Sheary, I think his time may have passed in the NHL. The Lightning, especially with that deadline deal, picking up Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gourde, I don't think need that veteran presence that Sheary provides. He did lead the Syracuse Crunch in goals. He was tied with Dylan Duke, who we'll talk about in a little bit, was second on the team in assists, and led the team with 61 points, 8 more than anyone else on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Also was second on the team with a plus 15 on the season, and was tied for second with 6 power play goals behind only Connor Geekie. And Geekie, obviously, I think is going to be a big part of what the Lightning do next season and in the future. But, Connor Sheary certainly showed his goal-scoring talent and, his ability to put up points for the Bolts. But I think there's now on that Crunch team, even on the Orlando Solar Bears, who are in the midst of a playoff run right now, I think that there's just some solid younger options that make guys like Connor Sheary almost obsolete when it comes to the Tampa Bay Lightning roster. But Max Crozier, I think, is someone that honestly is gonna make a play to start the season with the Tampa Bay Lightning. I mean, you look at Emil Ehlberg on the final year of his two-way deal. That's a guy that I think could be replaced by Max Crozier, but he's someone that I think the Lightning really need to take a really strong look at in terms of putting him on the roster. And Nick Perbix is a guy who might not come back. There has been no word yet on a potential signing of Nick Perbix. But I think with his expiring contract, it could be an easy way for the Lightning just to shed some cap, get Crozier on a two-way deal, and have him start the season with the Tampa Bay Lightning, because he has shown that he can be a reliable defenseman in the NHL. And he's certainly, put in his work in the AHL with the Syracuse Crunch and showed in those 5 games for Tampa, mostly when the Lightning had, I believe, Eric Chernak injured. But Crozier has shown that he can be a reliable piece on the offense and defensive end for Tampa Bay. And I think he's someone that is going to get a serious look coming out of camp for the Tampa Bay Lightning opening day roster. And Dylan Duke was one of the best offensive players for the Syracuse Crunch. And in his first NHL game, he was able to put in a goal. And this was his rookie season in Syracuse. So I think that might, delay his call up a little bit. But Dylan Duke has already shown that he can compete at the NHL level and that he can be a valuable piece of an NHL team. He scored a goal in the first of 2 games he played with Tampa Bay. That came on the road in Detroit. He was an all-star in college, 4th-round pick by the Lightning in 2021. And the Lightning's offensive talent, their forwards, their attacking players, that's a bit crowded, I think, at the NHL standpoint. So I think it's a lot tougher a road for guys like Dylan Duke, who are trying to make the jump from the AHL to the NHL. But he's another guy that I think could be considered for an NHL spot. And I think Max Crozier, if you look at the Crunch team, is definitely the most likely to be starting the 2025 season on the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think Dylan Duke is probably going to be the first offensive player that comes out of Syracuse, but I think Dylan will at least start the season with the Syracuse Crunch. But, if he keeps performing at the level that he did in his rookie season, 62 games and even 20 goals and 20 assists, one of them coming on the shorthand, one of those goals coming on the shorthanded side, 3 power play markers for Duke as well. And only 47 penalty minutes isn't too much. But he's certainly a player that the Lightning could use. And I think that, as we talked about earlier this week, the Lightning are really up against it with the salary cap, and they're going to have to look towards players like Dylan Duke, like Max Crozier, to get up on their NHL roster rather than the conventional way of getting, some bigger names in free agency just because of the limited cap space the Tampa Bay Lightning currently have. But they have some solid options there. And one player that I'm going to keep my eye on as well is Anthony Angelo, who was a 5th-round pick by the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2014. Still in his early 20s, but he certainly showed improvement after coming over from the Nashville Predators by way of the AHL Milwaukee Admirals. 60 games, 11 goals, 13 assists, 7-7 with Milwaukee in 41 games, 4 goals and 6 assists in 19 games with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So Angelo is a guy who certainly seems motivated and with his new opportunity with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think he's going to be another player who puts up a serious fight coming out of training camp. Ultimately, he might not make the team. Ultimately, I think the Lightning will look younger with Angelo 29 years old now. I think the Lightning will look younger if they're going to be adding guys from Syracuse, but with the way that he improved over his not even 20 games with the Syracuse Crunch, I think he's someone that you absolutely have to keep an eye on for a potential roster spot. And that is how we're going to end things off tonight. We'll have another show tomorrow, dropping at 10. Please give us a like, follow, subscribe. But until tomorrow, my name is Josh Sperber, and I want to thank you for making Locked On Lightning your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, make sure to check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night, until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale and find Locked On NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And wherever you listen to your podcasts, again, please give us a like, subscribe, a follow here on Locked On Lightning. We do the show for you guys, the Lightning fans, and we do appreciate your support. So thank you again for tuning in. Go Bolts, and have a great Thursday.